Welcome to today's podcast. My name is Paul Mossman, your leadership speaker and executive coach, and I'm glad that you decided to push that play button and join us on today's conversation. Today, we're talking about what I'd say is a secret skill set. So if you take your notes, write that down really quickly, and I will give you 4 points that will actually identify it and will help you kind of build this secret skill set. But before we jump right in it, I do want to take a quick moment to pause and give thanks to our sponsors here at the show, which makes this show possible. So let's take a quick break and let's give some thanks to our show sponsors for today. Now that we're back, let's go ahead and jump right in it, guys. I know you're excited because you push play today to get some results. And what I want to do is make sure that we deliver those results. We're going to give you some really easy framework to kind of work with. And I'll tell you this. I'll tell you where this originated from, because that's a good question to always ask. Anytime you're learning something, you want to know, how did this person come upon this information? You know, did they just Google it and kind of regurgitate the information to me? Did they put any good thought in it? And I'm going to tell you right now, this skill set was identified first in my life because I was sick and tired of my own crap. Yeah, I said it. You ever been there? Right? You ever been there? I mean, nod if you've been there. When you're kind of tired of your excuses, you're tired of complaining and not doing anything to do it. And it's not that I was doing that totally in my life, but I found myself in circles that was doing that. I found myself in circles that was complaining a lot and not doing anything to improve it. And I just, it was not for me, you know. I had to do something to change that. I had to do something to say, you know what, enough of just complaining about something and not doing it, right? Let's take action. So this skill set can pretty much be wrapped up in one word, and that word is initiate. Initiate. That's the word we're talking about today. And I say it's a secret skill set because it really works against our natural tendencies. You and I human beings have a natural tendency to get comfortable, especially when we get success, especially when we grow, right? We feel good about it. We like some level. That's why a lot of businesses stop growing, because they get a few steps forward and they stay there forever. They die on their first or second level of growth. Death, that's it. I had a friend that built a coaching franchise, and he would call his third level of business success the graveyard, because that's where most businesses die. But if you're a growing leader, if you're a high impact and healthy leader, we understand that we want to identify these things so we don't just die with the vision still in our head, right? There's a reason why God put a vision on your heart, and there's a reason why you decided to live a purpose-driven life. There's a reason why you want to not just make a high impact, but also have healthy principles in your life, right? Because there's something bigger that you're working for. This word initiate will work against our natural tendencies, because as we grow, we get comfortable and we wait for an invitation. Have you ever waited for an invitation or made an excuse saying, oh, I'm waiting for somebody to ask me, or nobody's asked me to do that yet? I pause on this because this just came to mind. I didn't plan on talking about this right now, but I pause on this, and I do want to address this really quickly. I hear this saying said before. It was even said to me, and I believed it for a season. And I really want to, if you've heard this and somebody have ever told you this, I want to squash this right now, because this thought process is inaccurate. And that thought process, what was said to me was basically, well, if nobody's asking you, maybe it's not for you. If nobody is inviting you, maybe you got to look for something else. And I say that's a bunch of BS. Like, no. If nobody's asking you, maybe you don't have to wait for an invitation, but it's for you to initiate. Sometimes we're waiting on an invitation for something when God puts something on your heart to initiate. I want you to think of that. I really want you to think of that. That's why this is a secret skill set in a sense, because we can't really wait for external confirmation on this. We can't wait for other people to say this. To initiate something is to go first. So if we're waiting for external confirmation, you'll be waiting forever on something that God wanted you to initiate, right? So we want to make sure that first and foremost, we understand what is a definition. To initiate means to start something, to cause the beginning of something, right? This is a pioneer hat. This is when you are trucking forward and you're blazing a trail, not following a trail, but you're blazing a trail. To do this is really a secret skill set because, like I said, external confirmation is not going to come on something that you're waiting, on something that you're called to initiate. So the 4 points I'm going to give you really quickly, right after I give you this story, because sometimes I want to tell you a story on how initiate can work in the middle of a process. Yes, it's to start something, but you can always start something even if you're part of something that's already moving. Here's a story. So I was part of an executive team that we launched a $20 million casino a few years back. And we went ahead, we did the hiring, we did the recruiting, we did the training, we built it, we launched it, we had the grand opening. It was awesome. But in that process, we had several big meetings where you had basically the owners of the company there. And it was these tough meetings where it was overcoming some big obstacles. And it's intense. You know, these meetings are intense. And you see two people on the board walk in, they're ready to have the meeting. Everybody's ready to go. We got our information ready. And as soon as the meeting is about to start, two of the execs are called outside. So they go outside, they take a call. When the call finishes, they return, but they don't return the same. The way one of them comes in is the same way he walked out. But the other exec, when he comes in, you can see it all over his face, all over his body, that it wasn't a good call. I don't know what was discussed on that call, but I do know that the way that one exec returned was bothering him the whole time. The entire rest of the meeting, everyone else that was in the meeting that had things to present held back. There is voices in your team that will be silenced because we fail to initiate. As the leader, if we fail to initiate, you will silence voices that you really want to hear on your team. They won't tell you anything because they see how you respond, and they don't want that. They see how you respond. What does it have to do with initiate, Paul Keller? I'm glad you asked. Remember, I told you initiate is to cause the beginning of. Even if you're in the middle of something, you still can choose to initiate. It's always a choice. Always a choice. You see, two execs left. They took the phone call. Two execs came back. That one exec that returned the same as he left chose to not react to that phone call, to not react to that information, but to cause the beginning of something good. You see, you always have a choice to initiate. That's the high level of this skill set. That really is. The beginning part of it is really maybe how you start your day, how you start your goals, how you start a meeting, but learning how to really initiate in the middle of chaos, in the middle of bad information, in the middle of a bad phone call will really take your leadership to the next level. What's the 4 points, Paul Keller? I'm glad you asked. Let's jump in it. So the 4 points, the first thing this is going to help us clearly define what initiate is. Number one, never a reaction, always a choice. Just like you clearly heard in that story I gave you. To initiate, it's never a reaction. It's always a choice. You always have a choice. You always have a choice. This is one thing as a leader you really want to believe and you really want to build in your leadership. It's never a reaction. You see, if you're somebody that's building this skill set to initiate, you're not reacting to things going on in a day, whether it's great or whether it's not, because great news can manipulate you into maybe overthinking, being overly hopeful of something, right? And then it blinds you to something else. So to initiate is empowering because you're not reacting, whether it's fluff that's trying to, like I said, use a good to kind of have you not look at something. I want to be clear on this. Sometimes you'll get a phone call. Sometimes you'll get a report that's overly good news because something really bad happened and they don't want you to see it. But reacting to that will cause you to lose sight of the whole picture. As a leader, you always want to see the whole picture. But if you're only being caused to see one part because you're reacting, you lose sight of the whole picture. So understanding how to initiate and still celebrate that moment, but not just be overly reactive to it, right? First point, never a reaction, always a choice. Second point, here we go, is never blame, always take responsibility. Never blame, always take responsibility. To build the skill set of initiate as a leader, we never blame. Always take responsibility. Once you blame, you give away your power. And it's not your power over people. It's your power over yourself. It's your power to decide. It's your power to change. It's your power to adjust. You see, once you blame, you give that away. So to initiate is to never blame. Always take responsibility. I can't tell you how many times we hear it in the language that comes up in a meeting. Sometimes when I work with my clients, I'll just sit in a meeting for a few times and I'll just take notes and I'll pick up how many times there's blame being tossed around if this is the leadership team we're talking about and there isn't no responsibility being taken, even if it's not their fault. You see, it might not be your fault, but it is your opportunity to serve, to change, to lead. So it doesn't have to be your fault in order for you to take responsibility. It could be somebody else's fault. But as a leader, we never blame, always take responsibility. This always helps build that skill set to initiate, because if we're blaming, we don't want to initiate. Once we take responsibility, now remember, we have the power to initiate, to cause change, to lead. Point number 3, let's jump in it. Point number 3 is never feels normal in the beginning. This one will rattle a lot of times because if we are an emotionally driven leader, emotion is great because it causes action, but at the same time, it can cause the wrong action. So we got to be aware of our emotions as a leader, not controlled by them. I'll say that again. You want to be aware of your emotions, but you don't want to be controlled by your emotions. Because it never feels normal in the beginning. It doesn't feel normal, like I said, because what feels normal is external confirmation. Oh, other people invited me. Awesome, I'm going to do this. Awesome, I'm going to do that. No, it doesn't feel normal to take that initiation, to start that step. It doesn't feel normal to blaze a trail, but we don't want to, we don't want to do what's normal if we want, if we want extraordinary results. But 2, we don't want to be controlled by our feelings. So we want to understand that to initiate is that it never feels normal in the beginning. Last thing I'll say with that is, after a while, working with the clients I work with the entrepreneurs, the more they practice this skill set, the more it does become a bit more normal. Number four is that it never needs an invitation. I dropped this a little bit in the beginning, and I kind of wanted to get our minds thinking about it. That's why I kind of weaved it in the beginning and throughout the conversation. So I'm not just repeating what I've already said. I wanted you to become aware of how much you're waiting for an invitation for something. Like, that's a good question to ask yourself. Like, what am I really waiting for an invitation? Because sometimes we don't think we are. Sometimes we think, I'm not waiting for an invitation. I'm not waiting for an invitation to help somebody. I'm going to ask you 2 questions, and we're going to close with those 2 questions. And the first question is, what conversation should I initiate today? You see, think about this, because you could be waiting for an invitation for somebody to come and talk to you. We say this as leaders. Well, they haven't came to me. They didn't book a meeting with me. Remember, you're the leader. Sometimes just the way people see you is very intimidating to make a meeting with you or to start a conversation. Or maybe you built relationship, but they just feel you're busy because you are. So since you're busy doing things, not gonna. It's very hard for them to initiate. And if they initiate, that's your invitation. So if you don't initiate, you're probably waiting for an invitation. So ask yourself, what conversation should I initiate today? You'll be surprised on the seeds you can learn from those that are quiet on your team, especially if you see them talking in the lunch hall with the rest of the team, but when you come in, they're quiet. There's probably something that they really have to say, but they're holding back. Go ahead and initiate the conversation. Second question, what behavior should I initiate today? This builds your credibility, and your credibility builds trust in the team. A team that trusts you is a team that's talking to you. I once led and managed a presidential restaurant. And one thing we'd always say in the food and beverage industry is that a quiet kitchen means something's wrong. I want to hear them talking. I want to hear the chefs talking. I want to hear the cooks talking. I want to hear everybody talking, because once everybody goes silent, there's no communication and something is burning, something is late, something is wrong. So what behavior should I initiate today? When you want people to come early, you want your leadership to do the same thing. You want them to start coming early. You want to initiate before you even give your why. A big, big mistake that I hear leaders get tied to is deliver the why before you deliver the message. Yes, that's great. But at the same time, if you want to deliver the why and the behavior doesn't match the why, no one's going to buy into it. If you want to execute something new in your team, if you want to start change, if you want to incite something for your team, like you want to share something with them, whether it's a bigger plan that's going to happen or a change, and you have a strong why, none of that will work if it doesn't align to the behavior of their direct leadership. You have to see, what is the direct leadership doing? Here is a very real example. I worked with a client one time. He was really struggling on getting his team to come in at 7:00. And the truth is, he actually wanted to move that up. They wanted to have them start coming in at 6:30, but they couldn't even come in at 7 on time. So how was you going to get them to come in earlier? He worked really hard on a why, and he worked really hard on a compelling message to inspire them. And he even tried to have ways that they'd be punished, right? They'd be written up if they didn't do it. None of it worked. When I started working with them, I started to see that, you know what? The direct leadership that's overseeing this department isn't coming on time. They're walking in with them. They're walking at the same time. The behaviors of the direct leadership wasn't aligned with the why and the how, and therefore none of that matters. So the question is, what behavior should I initiate today? If you lead with the behavior and you understand before you even give a great why or a great speech to your team, if the behavior doesn't match, none of it will resonate. That's it for today. We always ask ourselves 3 questions. I want to thank you for spending your time with us, but most importantly, not just spending time to listen in, but spending time to implement. How are you going to implement what we talked about today? How are you going to be the leader that builds this secret skill set to initiate? No longer do we wait for an invitation for what God has called you to initiate. With that being said, my name is Paul Keller Mossman, your leadership speaker, your executive coach, and right here, your podcast host.